There we go. All right, let's go ahead and go to our Father and ask him to watch over our time and our technology and all that we need from our God. We do thank you, Father, that we can meet together today. Pray that you'll just watch over our time and our technology. May all things be done in a way that honor you and accomplishes your purposes. And just pray for your direction and wisdom for each of my brothers and sisters here as we seek to serve you in the different parts of the world where you place us. It's in your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, we're on week 2. Let me just ask you, how has your experience been in terms of, let me get my video on here. All right, there we go. What's your experience been like in terms of finding the articles and the, what you're looking for so far? Why don't we just talk about that for a few minutes?
Well, I'll just add that I think for me, so much of this is it feels like a foreign language to me. so I have found myself scrambling to make sure, to understand all these concepts and theories. And so right now I'm just trying to get my mind wrapped around that so I understand this, the process for this. I think the other challenge I have as well is I have kind of a broad, I'm struggling to narrow down, which I need to work on what my dissertation topic will be. So I think as I do that, that will help my focus. So right now I think I've got to look at a lot of different articles, and that will help narrow down your focus. So Brian McCabe is my advisor, and he just said, Kevin, don't worry, it'll emerge. Just be patient. But so I'm finding some of my own stress of wanting to be where I'm a little bit further along. I think it's just part of the process.
If I may respond to Kevin, the entire class is at the same place where you are. And this is, if that is any comfort to you, in the sense that whenever we start broad. Mm-hmm. And think of it as like with a funnel, you have a broad opening, but to manage it, you'll have to narrow down. Now, what we are having you do here at the beginning is to go into the research literature. And as you read the research literature, that will help you to decide in which direction you want to go. And that is part of the process of narrowing down. So not to worry, this is the normal speed. This is the normal way it goes. You start broad and then you will narrow down. And our role is to help you, along with your colleagues, to narrow down to something that is manageable, doable, and something that you are passionate about, because research is very demanding. So one of the pre-requirements is that you choose something that you are passionately interested in, so that you will put in the time that is needed to do a satisfactory piece of research.
I have a couple. Actually, I think I have 100 questions, but I will reduce in 2 or 3.
Thank you for saving us.
But anyways, first, as I was searching for the article through Google Academic, I think, and some that I found we need to pay. Is that usually like that? Or I even bought one, but I wasn't sure if this was the way to do. And my second question was, yes, we need to read a lot. And as I was reading, I was I realized the number of articles that I read, I didn't find exactly one that talked about what I was looking for. So I tried to find the closest one. But I was thinking, should I find exactly the same? If I find doesn't make sense for me to be writing about. So I was like, kind of, should I keep going, or should I be happy because I didn't find exactly one? Or that's it. I don't know if it makes sense for you, my questions, but anyways.
Okay. First, I'll start with the easiest one first. In terms of finding articles that you may have to pay for. Before you pay for an article, please consult with our librarian, Jennifer Roman. Send her an email, give her all the information that is needed for her to help you to find the article. She will be able to, or she's most likely able to find that article for you that you do not have to pay for. Because especially since we're now starting the process, you don't want to have to pay for an article that you end up not using. Because right now, this is the exploratory stage of the research process. So I recommend that you contact Jennifer. Of course, don't expect her to respond to you in 24 hours, because there are a number of students like yourself who are contacting her for help in finding their articles. My second observation is in week 1, we have 2 documents that I recommend that you read if you haven't read them yet. One is how to read a research article, because what you're going to be doing in this early process is you are going to have to do some skimming so that you could select out the articles that you will use. So in the skimming process, you want to look at the purpose of the research. The title, of course, usually helps you to determine the purpose, but look at the purpose statement of the research. Look at the questions of the study. Look at the method of the study, and pay attention to the sample, who participated in the study. If it's a qualitative or quantitative research, you still need to look at the who, because in the qualitative study, you are likely one of the methods that are going to be used is having interviews. So who were interviewed? How many people were interviewed? Look at those quickly, and they will give you an idea. And then look at the conclusion, the findings of the study. And together, that should be able to answer your question as to, is this an article that is going to be helpful to me? So do some skimming, but it's more than skimming. But in terms of reading a piece of research article at this point, that's skimming. And then we did put into that, into the resource section, a guide that you could use to summarize the article that you have read, identifying those pieces. And that guide will help you as you come towards chapter 2, the review of the literature. I hope this helps. And okay, thank you, Bill.
Is that the guy you're talking about?
Yes.
Right there? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, let me make a few comments too in regards to what Paula was just asking. First, the issue of finding the article you want without having to pay, that's been an issue for me at different times too. I sometimes with ProQuest, it's not quite as an issue because they subscribe to a lot of journals, et cetera, and you have access. I've just started using Google Scholar, and I haven't used it as much in the past, but I noticed that it will bring up, an article, and then you have to go pay for it because, I looked at one, it was in, the American Journal of Psychology. And so, you have to subscribe pay $36 for the article, which is craziness. I understand that. Another thing I found helpful though, if you go to Google Scholar and you can't find the whole text, okay, you can't get a full text, you can only get maybe the abstract. I also found it helpful just to go to a general search engine, for example, the regular Google search engine or Bing or whatever you happen to have, enter the title of the article, the document. I did this yesterday. I took an article, I just entered it into a regular Google engine, not Google Scholar, and it brought up 4 different sites where I could find that text. And so I went to each one of those. 2 of them were the subscription, but the third one that I found, it didn't require a subscription. It actually opened up, and I had the option to get a full text. So sometimes you have to kind of be a little creative to sometimes get to an article. And if all else fails, as Dr. Henry just said, you can contact our librarian, Jennifer. But I would, at times, just go into a regular search engine, enter the title of the article, and see what you find. Sometimes you will find other sites that have that article that you're looking for. So that is another option when you're looking for items. Okay, since we did
Very helpful.
I did just bring this. This is the document for this week that we had put it onto the site, and the idea here is just to give you some kind of a document where you can continually add items that you find, so that when you get into the actual dissertation process, you're going to have a list of articles, books, whatever that you'll be able to turn to and begin as you start putting together the outline of your whole dissertation. You're going to be able to see where some of your sources are going to be able to help you develop various sections. And this is just one way. This is putting it into a table format. If you're comfortable with that and that works for you, the title of the article, or if it's a book, the title of the book, the author, the date of publication, the source. In this case, this is a journal. A Journal of Information Technology for Teachers. Like I put in the star, though, in this column, if it's just a book, just say book, and you'll remind yourself that this is a book. Try to determine what's the main research question for, say, a journal article. If it's a book, what's the main thesis of the book? Hypotheses or assumptions. And a hypothesis, if you're doing a quantitative study, and a hypothesis is a statement of something that is seeking to be proven through the study, okay? So, that may be the case in a journal article you're looking at, or, something else, or an assumption, or, if you're looking at a qualitative study, we go into a situation with maybe possible assumptions about a situation, about a population, whatever we're dealing with. Maybe whatever the author is, you maybe have an assumption. Again, findings are just, for a journal article, what actually was found through that article. If it's a book, what are some of the main conclusions that you might write down, just to remind yourself of how that book might be useful to you. So again, this is just a tool. Somebody may not be comfortable with having a chart, so then you can just, have title, author. You could just make a heading on a page and just have a series of entries that way. Whatever you're comfortable with. The idea, though, is just to get some kind of a listing so that you can always be able to go back and refer to that when you're putting together, your literature review, or the theological sections, or the research sections, or the context section. The source list that you're starting now hopefully will be helpful to you as you are working on bringing the various parts of your dissertation together over the coming months. Any other thoughts or questions on searching for sources?
I have a question. So what were our assignment to turn in this week? Is that from this chart to fill that in?
Yeah, I just wanted you to kind of have some practice. I think I only asked you to fill in 4. Just give me 4 sources to let me know that you are, starting to work on sources. Yeah, so that's the assignment this week.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Yeah, my comment about that was actually really difficult for me last week. What Kevin said and what Paula said, I think I can relate with. It was like a little bit of a foreign language. My topic, I work as a strategic planner, facilitator for organizations, and after going through the immersion overture in Pittsburgh with Dr. Brian last year, I was very intrigued why some organizations have strategic plans that they fulfill and implement and others don't. So I was looking along those lines. So it has a little bit to do with strategic planning, a little bit to do with change management, because that's part of the reason why they don't fulfill their strategic plan. But as I was looking for sources, I had a hard time as well. I was able to find strategic planning in healthcare. I was able to find some things that maybe didn't fully relate, but that did have some connection. So, you know, what if I guess my question then becomes, if I find something that talks about effectiveness of strategic planning in healthcare, is that something I can still use that's relevant to what I would use for my dissertation, even though I'm not focused on healthcare? I'm really working with almost all organizations.
Right. From my perspective, and Dr. Henry can give her perspective, but my perspective is, if you're looking at an article that is dealing, say you're dealing with planning, community planning or somehow, it really doesn't matter the particular sector, but you're learning, you're gaining some principles that a particular article is referring to, even though it's in relationship to a particular sector. So again, you're looking for principles that you can apply in your particular dissertation topic.
Thank you.
Okay, just to add to what Dr. Payne has said, strategic planning is the concept that you will be looking at. Healthcare is the context. So your focus has to be on the concept, not the context. So if you see something that is not within your context of study, you need to still look at that, because the key issue there is strategic planning. So when you report that in the literature, you will be able to say that this research on strategic planning was done in the context of healthcare, and this is what they found. And what would be interesting is when you look at the strategic planning in different contexts, it will be interesting to see that findings may be similar. You could talk about similarity of findings, or you may find differences, and you may suggest that perhaps there are differences because the context is different. But either way, the issue of strategic planning is your focus. So in whatever context you find the literature, you should look at it.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah,
another question.
Let me just say one more thing to that, Tim. I just wrote on the screen, it's helpful to me to kind of think about how, different kinds of articles, books, etc. I think I mentioned in the email, this last week we were asking you to find empirical articles that actually do a study on a population. You'd have a sample, you have a methodology. That kind of gives you, practice on looking at empirical articles, and then, determining, say there was studies done on how planning principles worked in a particular community. You maybe would look at that, and then you'd see how some methodologies were used, and that would be helpful. Other kinds of articles are going to maybe help you define some of the concepts, just the general concept of planning or strategic planning. There's going to be some articles that just help define and give you principles on that whole topic. That's part of your theoretical concept, okay? Framework. I guess we should use the word framework here. But that idea is on general articles on strategic planning. There's other articles that maybe will help you define a particular context, okay? Articles or books as you're defining a particular context. So, all those are important as you're bringing together various kinds of sources that help you develop various parts of your dissertation.
Okay. One other question, if I may ask. So it's not hard for me to find books in this area, and maybe some articles, empirical articles. Again, it's relatively new to me, but it was a lot harder. As we're putting together this source list, does it have to be heavy in empirical articles? Can it mix? Can it be? I mean, what does it need to be as we put this reference list together?
I would like to answer that question. The focus has to be on empirical research, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. Now, some of the books, or many books that you may look at, may be compilations of research. So from that context, you may find the book is helpful. But in order to stay focused in terms of the fact that you're doing research, we would like you to look more at the journal articles. Research articles are usually documented in the journals. So let that be your focus. The disadvantage of using the books is sometimes what the books do. The book is a secondary resource in the sense that the book reports on research. So what you're getting is a secondhand account, whereas what you need to be able to do is to become familiar with first-hand accounts of research, and that's what you will find in the journals. I hope that makes sense to you, to all of you.
Okay. One other question with what you just said. So if a book has first-hand research in it, does it have value to us, even though it's maybe not considered peer-reviewed?
Okay, well, if it's original research, it will have to be peer-reviewed if it's published. So when it's published in a book or in a journal, it is peer-reviewed because it is a valid research.
I'm going to just say a few things about the idea of peer-reviewed, because sometimes that can create some problems. If you're, say, on Google Scholar or on ProQuest, I know both of these do that, you can enter the word peer-reviewed, with your title. I think I put an email out to that effect. That's then going to bring up articles, that are peer-reviewed. Peer-reviewed, again, that term often confuses me a little bit, but the best I'm looking at that, if I look at a Google Scholar entry, it's going to tell me how many times that particular article has been cited. And then I can actually then go look at those and see who is citing that article. That will give me an idea. Are people who are I would consider them of high reputation academically, practitionerly wise, etc. If I believe that those are people that I consider credible, and I look at the citations, and I know that I'm going to consider that having a fairly trustworthy, it's a fairly trustworthy peer-reviewed source. Okay, I think we're getting. Hopefully we're getting better at this at BGU, okay? I've been with BGU since its inception back in 1990. And the dissertation process has evolved, over the years, as it does in a lot of institutions, okay? When I look back at some dissertations early on, they have given me a series of opinions of various people who have an opinion on a particular topic. Okay, opinions are fine. Again, you have to determine who's giving the opinion. We live in a day now when, you know, we can prove just about any point by going to the internet and finding those sets of articles that will support our particular perception, you know, or our particular stance. It's becoming more and more difficult, I think, to actually put forth documenting, supporting kinds of articles and works in our dissertations, because you can basically go and pretty much prove just about anything, like I've said. If you use, when we use the term empirical, we're talking about studies where somebody or a team of people have actually, you know, tried to look at, say, a population of people. I mean, that's one. You know, there are scientific experiments where we can, you know, we can crash a car into a wall and see how many, at what speed the, you know, the bumper starts to crinkle. Okay, that's a quantitative experiment. What we're involved in mainly, though, we're usually looking at people and populations. And so empirical studies are going to be collections of articles that have done a study of a particular sampling of some people in a particular situation. And they've arrived at some results to make some generalizations about a particular characteristics, okay? You know, if you say we're using strategic planning, and we look at some articles that that are studies about how certain strategic planning principles have been used in a particular community and produced such and such results. Okay, that's an empirical study. I could just say, you know, Fred Jones or Mary Smith think such and such. Now I'm just getting someone's opinion, somebody else's opinion, okay? That's why we're trying to get more and more the use of empirical studies so that we aren't just quoting somebody else's opinion.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Thank you.
Yes, I would just like to go back to the issue of peer review to clarify the meaning of it and why it's important that we look at peer-reviewed work when we are doing our own research. Now, the peer review is referring to the fact that your equals, your professional equals, have examined your work, your research, and they have acknowledged that it is credible. So in the world of academia, peer review represents what we call quality control. And so when a research is published in a journal, and we have a numbers of them out there, we know that that research has validity and credibility because it has been reviewed by professionals in the field. So it's a term of quality control, and each article published in a peer-reviewed journal is closely examined by reviewers who are experts on the article's topic, and that's the important thing. These reviewers are themselves experts, and the peer review process is quite demanding. In some journals you're going to find online, they're going to give you information on when the article was submitted to the journal for it and how long it takes for the article to be accepted by the journal. Sometimes it takes a year or more than a year for an article to be accepted after it's been submitted, because the peer reviewers had questions about the article, and the writer or writers of the research had to make revisions, etc. So I'm just explaining so you could understand why we are saying that we want you to focus in on research articles found in peer-reviewed journals. So I hope that makes sense to you.
Okay. Well, I'm going to jump on to another topic, unless you got another question on this issue.
Dr. Bill, excuse me.
Go ahead.
I have a question from Dr. Claire.
Sure.
In my week one assignment, she indicated about that my topic has 3 broad focuses, and I want her to help me explain what she means by the 3 broad focus that I have in my topic. And she added the issue of church growth. I was not seeing church growth in my topic. So I need a clarification from her.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Henry.
Okay. The best way for me to clarify it with you, Tammy, is to literally go to your post and show you it. And I think in fairness to the rest of the class, I would prefer to do that one-on-one with you. Now, in terms of broadness, I don't know if you were here at the beginning when we talked about it, but I said that all of us at this point of the process, we are thinking broadly. That's the normal process that you go through as you move towards identifying the research topic, the research issue that you will study, so that you do not have to be troubled in any way with a commentary that says you are broad. That's normal. And
okay.
that commentary is made to help you to recognize that this is normal, but having started out at this breadth, the goal is to get you to focus on something that is manageable in terms of the research. Okay?
Okay.
Good.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I want to spend a little bit of time just on some technical issues on writing. As we grade papers, as we read papers, as I read dissertations, there's just a lot of common writing issues that I have to continually comment on. And our technical reader has to do the same thing when dissertations come to her. But I wanted to just look at 2 areas. I want to kind of look at just some general writing issues. And there's a document called 22 Tips from the Technical Reader. And then I'm going to just look at a document on, just a sample document on APA formatting that I'd like us just to look at a few points, just so I think it'd just be helpful to go over some of these points verbally so that we're all together on some of these issues. This document called 22 Tips from the Tech Reader is contained on the info page of the course. And I really do encourage you, I probably should require and give you a test on this content. But the idea is that there's some of these specific items that need to be observed when you're doing writing of your proposal and writing of the actual dissertation report. I'm going to just go over these very quickly, and you need to just kind of go back over them in a more detailed way to make sure that you are following these kinds of points. Look at that first point. When referring to yourself, use the pronoun I or me, not the author or the researcher. In times past, it was customary to talk in the 3rd person, to talk about the author or the researcher. Now APA wants us just to use the 1st person. Whether if I'm the person who's writing a paper, I'd refer to myself as I or me. If I'm working with a team of researchers, I could use the term we as the researchers for this paper, and that would then be understood when you're using that term. Okay. What we don't want to use is what's called the editorial we. Sometimes we, and I'm just using it now, we often speak this way, and you'll in a lot of books talk this way. We need to be servant leaders. Well, who are we talking about when we talk about we? We as all people, we as Christian leaders, we as teachers. In APA, they would tell you, make sure you are specifically saying who you are talking about. Okay, in this case, we as Christians need to be servant leaders, if that's the point you're making, okay? If you're talking about a particular team of, say you're on a leadership team in an organization, say we on the staff of XYZ organization do such and such. Okay, you've made it clear to your reader who we is going to refer to. Then you can use we in the rest of the paragraph and maybe in the next few paragraphs. But we always need to be, and I'm saying, even when I talk, we as students, we as people working in academics, we need to be clear on who we're talking about. That is just a very common writing issue. The same thing, sometimes people say, it's such and such. The term you, again, is not a term that we use in dissertation writing. Now, the only exceptions, of course, with both of these would be is if these are contained in a quotation, and so of course, you're going to copy the quotation using we or you if your author used those words. Another issue is the term this. Don't start a sentence with just this. This was used to gather the data. What is this referring to? Sometimes we think, well, it's just obvious. It's referring to what I said in the previous sentence. There again, APA that makes very specifically, don't have these vague words, articles such as this starting a sentence. Okay, this approach was used in this project. Okay, so try to become aware of some of these little technical issues that are unique to a dissertation writing. The use of gender-inclusive language, we try to make a big point about this at BGU and other academic institutions. Even the word mankind is now not even being used in a lot of academic. We would say they use the word humanity, okay? So become aware of just some of these issues that are current in our academic work. Sometimes in order to not have an awkward sentence, you may use a plural form. For example, a leader must model servant leadership for his or her team. Okay, that's one way to say that. It's a little awkward. You could restate that sentence simply by saying leaders must model servant leadership for their teams. Okay. Unfortunately, what happens sometimes is we'll say we'll mix up the subject. Say the subject of this sentence is a leader. A leader must model servant leadership, and then sometimes people will say for their team. If we use the word their, we have a leader, which is singular, and their, which is plural. Some academic institutions are starting to allow that. We don't allow that at BGU. If you've never used the online program called Grammarly, I would recommend that you look into that program. Grammarly, there is a free version of Grammarly, and it will help you, it'll sometimes catch many of these issues in your paper. Now, I was just looking at Grammarly yesterday. It doesn't catch the we, and it doesn't always catch the this, okay? It does catch, though, subject-verb agreement, this one that we were working with here. Anyway, so subject-verb agreement, plural goes with plural, singular goes with singular. Okay, some of these others you can just kind of look at, spelling out numbers 1 to 9. And Turabian and APA actually use different criteria for that. At BGU, we just say spell out all numbers 1 to 9. Anything after 9, go ahead and use the numeral. Make sure you put Bible references in parentheses after it. Don't say John 3:16 says. It's not really good form. We could say John said, for God so loved the world, okay? And then we'd quote where that scripture came from, John 3:16. Capitalization, again, another issue. For example, the term Bible or scripture is a noun, and those are capitalized, but the adjectives biblical or scriptural, those are adjectives, and they are not capitalized. For reference to God, use he, him, or his. You can use the lowercase. I, of course, I like to use a capitalization, but you do have an option in academic writing. When you're emphasizing a word, use italics rather than bold, okay? When you define a word, you're going to have a section in your introduction chapter of the proposal, and it's customary to put a defined word, a word you're going to define, to put that in italics, okay? Not bold. Yeah, here's the singular plural issue. A teacher should be aware of their students' needs. Okay, we know that's not correct because we have a singular subject here, a teacher, and then we have a plural, a pronoun. So if we were going to be correct, we could either say a teacher should be aware of his or her students' needs. That would be one way to say that. You could put it in the plural, like I said earlier, teachers should be aware of their students' needs. So now we have teachers, plural, and we have their, plural. Just some of these issues. Avoid one-sentence paragraphs as much as possible. Oftentimes, sometimes people will just have a sentence and they'll make it into a paragraph. Generally, you can connect that sentence to the previous or the next paragraph. Some of these are just some standard issues. We use font 12 for all the writing. This is another issue that sometimes is a problem for students. When you have a series of words in a sentence, my research approach included surveys, interviews, and focus groups. Notice there's always a comma after the next to the last word in that sequence of words. Of course, this is a biggie to avoid plagiarism, and we have to work with this all the time. Avoid plagiarism by using quotation marks or block quotes for all direct quotes. In APA, use parenthetical references, and Turabian use footnotes. Even if you give, the opinion of an author, you need to give credit. Document it in a footnote. If you're using Turabian, put it in a parenthetical right behind the sentence. Okay, even if you're not quoting directly and you're giving an opinion, you need to give credit. I've often seen another error though on this issue. Sometimes students will just copy a direct quotation into their paper without putting quotation marks, and then they'll give credit to the author, but they haven't put that quotation in quotation marks. If you don't put quotation marks around a directly quoted piece of work, you are plagiarizing, because the quotation marks show that that sentence is directly quoted from a particular person. All right. Let me just kind of jump down. You can kind of look at this document again on your own. Yeah, double space all text in APA, including block quotes and list. This one's hard to get used to. Is this the one? Yeah, this is the one that's very difficult for students. Do not put an extra line of space between paragraphs. That's not the hard one. Also, there should only be one space between sentences. Our technical reader always catches that. In times past when we used typewriters, we would generally put 2 spaces between each sentence because it was just needed for the mechanical typewriter. Now that we have word processing, it's customary now to only put 1 space between sentences. Those of us who grew up with typewriters, we just automatically put 2 spaces between a sentence. You got to get out of that habit when you're using a word processor. Let's see.
Excuse me, Dr. Payne.
Go ahead, Dr. Henry.
I think we need to clarify that statement about the spacing, because when I hear 1 space, I'm thinking single space. However, in APA, you're required to double space throughout the document. And that's simple. So you set your computer setting to double space and you just keep typing. Because in APA, you don't double space between paragraphs or between sentences, etc. So I would want to rewrite that statement. It is about not moving beyond double spacing when it
Mhm.
comes to the APA style. You just double space throughout the document.
That's a good point, Dr. Henry. Yeah, I think I will make that even more clear. One of the issues,
Thank you. That's helpful.
yeah, if you're using MS Word, I've noticed some of the format, the word escaped me right now, but just the standard format puts an extra half line of space between paragraphs, okay? The template that we use, we've taken that out. So if you use this, and we want you to use the standard template, that's why we use it. It is made so that it's double spacing everything, and it's not putting another line of space between paragraphs. So yeah, let's make sure that we are clear on that. So yeah, so probably what we'll need to do is rewrite this to make sure that everything is double spaced. That means there's a line of space between each line, okay? But there is not an extra line of space, between paragraphs. So yeah, I'm glad you caught that. All right, let's see anything else here. I just kind of made a little chart here, and some of this is APA, and some of this is just really difficult to get used to. But I kind of gave you this chart. Hopefully, you can kind of look through this. Book titles. This is in the reference list. In APA, we use sentence case italics. In Turabian, we use title case italics. In journal titles, the title of the journal is in title case italics in APA, and it's the same in Turabian. Title case italics for Turabian. The journal article title, though, in APA is in sentence case font. No quotation marks, not in italics. This is the article's title. In Turabian, they use title case. You capitalize all the important words, and they put quotation marks around it. So, there are these differences between APA and Turabian. Some of us are really pushing for the idea that we could hopefully maybe get to the point where we're going to just use one format at BGU. I don't know if we'll get that, because some people have used Turabian and they've just used that. And I understand that. But it really is difficult, especially for those of us who have to grade papers, to go back and notice that there are all these differences between Turabian and APA. But I have made this little chart for you. It might help as you're trying to work through your paper.
Bill, quick question.
Go ahead.
Difference between title case and sentence case is what?
Okay, let's look at here. Here's a journal article. If I say this is in sentence case, notice I capitalize the first word, but then all the rest of the words in the sentence, it's like a sentence, are in lowercase. Sentence, lowercase, lowercase. Title case means you capitalize each of the important words, they call them. Title, case, font. Prepositions like with, from, etc. are not, or conjunctions like and are not capitalized. Who can figure, whoever made these rules kind of just gave it to us so confuse us all, but that is the case. Title case means you capitalize all the main words. Sentence case, you start with a capital letter and then you use a lowercase, just like you would do when you're writing a sentence. Okay? Let's look at some APA issues here. Let's see if I can make this bigger. Okay. This is an article from Purdue University. And if you've never used the Purdue Academic Center, Purdue University just has an amazing academic success center. I forget what they call it now, the OWL, the OWL. But if you've never used it, but I just wanted us to look at an article here and just pick out a few items that will be helpful. Some of the issues that are in APA we don't use in the BGU template. For example, in standard APA, you'd put a running head, which means there's a title of the article on every page of the piece. In a journal article, that would normally be the case. For a dissertation, we at BGU have chosen not to have a running head. Okay. You'll have an abstract for a dissertation. You don't have an abstract for your proposal. But for your dissertation, an abstract is a one-paragraph summary of the paper, and it's a maximum of 300 words. It kind of introduces the topic, maybe makes a few statements about it, and then it just kind of summarizes some of the findings of that paper. That's what an abstract is. Let's look at some of these, some samples. I just put them in yellow highlights. Okay, online education has grown at exponential rates in the past few years, where, quote, 12.9% growth rate for online enrollments far exceed the 1.2% growth rate of the overall higher education student populations. Okay, in this case, we've put a parenthetical at the end of that sentence, okay, because here we started with some quotation marks. This now shows the reader that this quotation came from this source called Allen and Seaman, comma, 2008, comma, page .1. Okay, now the reader should be able to then go to the reference list and find that exact entry. They should be able to go to the A's, and they're going to find the word Allen. Let's see if that's the case in this paper. If I go to the reference list for this paper, okay, here it is, Allen, and in the parenthetical, we only use the last names, Allen and Seaman. But the reader can then go alphabetically, find Allen, that was the first word that was the entry in that parenthetical, and know, okay, this is the source that's being referred to there, Allen. IE is just the abbreviation in APA. You would normally just abbreviate the first name and possibly the second initial. If there is no issue, then again, like Seaman, J, you put the last name, comma, and then the first name initial. Unfortunately, in Turabian, they spell out the names, the first name, okay? But in APA, we only use the initial. So again, the reader can go and find this reference within the reference list. Let's go back to where we were. So we had Allen and Seaman, and it's, in this case, the parenthetical is put immediately following that quoted content, okay? Let's see, let's look at another example. Okay, in this case, here's another type of parenthetical that APA has stated. If you mention the author's name within the text, say within the paragraph, then the format is to put in parentheses the year of the source. Okay, Serez or Costco, 2007, explains it like this. And then we have a block quote. Again, a block quote, since we're on that. In APA, we use this block quote format for 40 words or more of any particular quotation. Indented 0.5 inches, double spaced. In Turabian, a block quote is single spaced, okay? But I'm going to keep focusing on APA. Notice here, though, when the authors, and this is two authors, if their name is mentioned in the paragraph, and it's best to introduce a quotation with the name, then just put the year of the source behind the name of the author, okay, and that signals to the reader, okay, this is the author, this is the year. I can go to the reference list again, and I should be able to find that reference in that order. Okay, there they are right there. Serez and Arco, okay, so the reader knows, and it was 2007. The whole point of the parenthetical formatting is to help a reader be able to correlate what's going on in the text, to easily correlate that entry, that reference in the reference list. And that's important. Sometimes students will put something different here, or say over here, they'll put something a little different here, and then, maybe they just start with the title of the article here, but in the reference list, they've put the name of the article, that entry alphabetized by the author. The important thing is the reader must be able to correlate what's going on here in the in-text parenthetical with what's going on in the reference list. That's the whole point of using a parenthetical format. Okay, so we've got two different examples. In this case, Allen and Seaman weren't mentioned. We could have started this, we could have said, according to Allen and Seaman, there's a 12.9% growth rate for such and such. I could have done that sentence that way, and then I would have used, this kind of a format, putting the year afterwards. But in this case, I didn't, the name of the author was not mentioned in the sentence, so therefore quotation marks, and we just put the parenthetical behind the sentence. Let me stop there. Is that fairly clear in terms of where you put the parenthetical? Determine if the author's name is mentioned in the text, in the paragraph or not?
That's Dr. Payne. That's
yes.
Clear. I have a question though. I'm sorry, I came in after we started, but when I say according to Allen and Seaman, and then I put the year, do I have to mention the title of the book in their book, this and this and this?
No, and I would actually prefer, and it's best practices not to mention the book. Sometimes I see students, they'll say, Allen and Seaman in their book, the use of online technology, that really is frowned upon, unless the title is really important for your reader to know at that moment. I mean, the idea is, Allen and Seaman, if the reader really wants to know the name of their book, the reader just needs to go to the reference list and look up Allen and Seaman. It makes your paper quite a bit longer by always putting in all the titles. Even in a literature review chapter, you don't really need to be stating the titles of all the books. Simply the last name of the author is the customary way to do that kind of academic writing.
Thanks.
Let's see if there's other issues in here that we should just kind of look at. Okay, here's a problem. Now, in this particular article, they're using the word us in a wrong way. Gardenfors, 2007, reminds us that simply teaching students about other cultures. Okay, here is the issue that in APA, we're using the word us in an editorial, like the editorial we or the editorial us. Who is us? Well, in a lot of general writing, it reminds us. Well, us who are doing the reading of this article, us who just, whatever. But that would not be correct format in a dissertation writing, to be very specific. Okay, we wouldn't say that. We would just say Gardenfors says that simply teaching students about other cultures does not necessarily equate to a learning, rather than saying reminds us, because there's that word us, not identifying who us refers to. Okay, interesting. Not APA, I mean, Microsoft Word did pick it up, not correct use of plural first person pronoun. But that's interesting. Microsoft did pick up that word when I pointed to it. All right. Is that true? No, I guess that's a comment I put in there. I'm sorry. Microsoft did not pick up that. I put that comment to myself, not a correct use of the first person plural pronoun. Let's see. Okay, look at, in this paragraph, we've mentioned this name, Gardenfors. I'm probably not pronouncing that right. But anyway, we've mentioned this author, and we've given a correct parenthetical by putting the year behind the author's name. Okay, now I can mention Gardenfors' name again in the paragraph. Gardenfors suggests that one of the best ways for students to learn about another culture is to learn the language and immerse themselves in the culture. If I don't put any other page numbers or anything, it's understood by the reader that we're still talking about Gardenfors' source that was a 2007. So I do not need to put 2007 again after Gardenfor's name if I mention that name again. If I gave a direct quotation by Gardenfor, say if this was a direct quotation, this last sentence, an incredible, exciting challenge for online education is to explore ways to allow this to take place, then I would need to put in parentheses P.78 or whatever page the exact quotation came from. For every quotation, a direct quotation must have a page number, okay? If you just give a general opinion by an author, you don't have to put a page number, but it's a good idea, it's recommended that if you're giving a specific opinion by an author, to put a page number, even if you're not directly quoting. But nevertheless, even if you are giving an opinion, at least you need to mention Gardenfor's name. Sometimes a student will just he'll make a statement here, and then they'll go on with other sentences, but then the reader has no idea if those sentences are opinions of Gardenfor or if they're just student opinions, okay? So always make it clear if you're continuing the thought of a particular author. You know, I'm going over a lot of stuff here quickly, and hopefully as you turn in your papers and we make comments, we'll be able to even make comments on these issues. Here's an odd one. However, Olanrian points out that, quote, some cultures adopt technology only as long as it does not conflict with their norms. Quotation mark, Heaton, quotation mark. Okay, why do you think that's like that? Why do we have two sets of quotation marks there? This is a really confusing one.
Because Olanarian is quoting Heaton.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it. So notice we have the quotation marks, and then the term, a parenthetical Heaton 2001 was in Olanrian's writing, and so we also have quotation marks around that to show the reader that this whole highlighted section was from Olanrian. And the page 26 is the place in the book where that was found. The other thing, let's see if this is the one that is this case. Let's get Olanrian. Okay, the other interesting thing about this particular reference by Olanrian, 2007, challenges to implementing e-learning in lesser developed countries. Ian A. Edmondson's Ed Globalization. Okay. Where is this article found based on that reference? Is this a book by Olanrian?
It's an article found in, he wrote a contribution to Globalized E-Learning Cultural Challenges, edited by.
Very good. Okay. Yeah. So this is a chapter, most likely, called Challenges to Implementing E-Learning in Lesser Developed Countries. And now we're telling the reader it's in this other book by Edmondson, who is the editor, called Globalized E-Learning Cultural Challenges. So again, that's a little bit of a convoluted one. Olanrian has written a chapter in this book, and so the chapter title is in sentence case. The book title is in sentence case, but it's in italics. The chapter title is in non-italics, but it's still in sentence case. Okay, all these little issues for APA, and you get into some of these same issues with Turabian, but you know, we're using APA at this point for this example. I think I'm going to stop there. I think I'll go ahead and just put this article in the on the info page in case you want to take a look at it again, just to kind of help you see. Let's stop there. Take any questions?
Yeah, Dr. Payne, if you go back to the article from Elian,
here we go. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So in this quote, where is the first? Where do we put the full stop? Is at the end of the sentence. So if this quote was all from Heaton, where would the full stop be, the period be?
So that again, if the we want to know if the period would be where, if what is the case?
For example, Orangeran,
Yeah,
if
this
there was
person. Mhm.
Orangeran and it appeared instead of Hiton, yeah?
What's going on here? Let me just say what I understand happening.
I guess what I'm asking is, where does the period go?
I
Is
see.
it after?
Yeah, the
after
period still goes at the end of the whole sentence.
Okay.
You know, in your dissertation, because this is a sentence in, say, in this article. So the period, you don't put a period over here, okay? The period goes at the end of your sentence, okay? So the other situation here that we really wouldn't know, Orlanian points out that, and then he gives this quotation mark. We don't know for sure if this was an exact quotation from Heaton or just an opinion from Heaton that Orlanian is stating. I wouldn't know that from this situation. I only know that this whole sentence, starting from the quotation marks in front of some and ending with the quotation marks behind the Heaton in parentheses, that whole sentence or phrase was contained in Orlanian's work. And then I can also know that that is an opinion or a direct quotation from this person named Heaton, but we don't have any other information about Heaton because in APA, you're not required to put the Heaton reference in your reference list, okay? Because you didn't directly read Heaton. You were reading an article by Orlanian in an edited book, but you didn't actually read the article by Heaton. So you don't put anything about Heaton in your reference list because that just appeared in a quoted content from this person, Orlanian.
Dr. Payne, shouldn't 2007 appear in parentheses after Orlanian?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that would be my, if we go down to the reference list again, yeah, I think that would have been the better way to do it, in my opinion, because we've got Orlanian 2007. Since we're mentioning his name within, now see, in this case they did do Orlanian. Probably in this other case, because we got into all this convoluted issue, they thought it was better to not put the 2007 there. That's the only thing I could see.
It appears at the top of the paragraph, and so as I understand it, you only have to, if you once per paragraph. So we put that there.
Oh, you're right. Yep.
So I see. I didn't see that before.
I didn't see that either. So yeah, that's the issue. We've already mentioned the source in this paragraph at the beginning of the paragraph, Orlanian 2007. Therefore, down here, we do not need to again put in the year because we've already mentioned it within the paragraph. So yeah, good point. And the other point you just made, Melissa, is that if you go into the next paragraph, if I say quoted Orlanian again, I would need to say Orlanian 2007. That lets the reader know in a new paragraph, I'm still referring to the same source by this particular Orlanian author.
So are you saying that we should put, when we're paraphrasing, we should put a paraphrase in quotation marks?
No, don't put the paraphrase in quotation marks, but let's see if there's any. Okay, here's one. You know, Gulfers suggests that one of the best ways for students to learn about another culture is to learn the language and immerse themselves in the culture. Okay, now since the author did not put in quotation marks one of the best ways for students, we can assume that that's not a direct quotation from Gardens 4, it's simply an opinion. But since I've already given credit to Garden 4 and this person's source, 2007, it's now understood that this is still the same source, even though this is simply a paraphrase of Garden 4's opinion and not a direct quotation.
And you wouldn't need to put in parentheses after the non-quotation marks because it's not a direct quote, but it is his opinion that you paraphrased. You still don't have to put, because I thought I heard you say that even something that you, an opinion, that you would still put the page number in parentheses after that?
You wouldn't have to. I could, if I wanted the reader to know, where this opinion can be found, I could have put in parentheses right after the word culture, parentheses, P.22, close parentheses, period.
Okay.
That would have been even more specific to let the reader know where this opinion can be found in Gardner's Force work, even though it's not a direct quotation.
Okay. That's it. Thank you. I was going to ask another question because I saw that in the one with Olenarian, it seemed like he capitalized the first word inside the quotation mark, but in my opinion, it was a continuation of the sentence, so that shouldn't have been capitalized. And so but then I see right here above where we just were, that was reflection, it's bouncing around, but that there was another quotation mark where the first letter inside the quotation was not capitalized. So
Yeah,
that's
let me see if I can find that again.
What point do I capitalize that first letter within the beginning quotation?
Here's one right here, I think.
Yeah.
While other cultures in our marginalized population are served through this medium of learning, culture and language privilege particular forms of knowledge and ways of learning. See, if it's a complete sentence, if this was the beginning of a sentence, culture, then you would capitalize it. Otherwise, you wouldn't. This particular phrase must not have been the beginning of the sentence, starting with culture. That must have been taken from the middle of a sentence. Okay. But if it had been the beginning of a sentence, yes, you would have capitalized culture.
Okay, so it depends on whether or not it's the beginning of a sentence in the original source.
Right, correct.
Not whether or not it's a continuation of your sentence.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the key. So many things to learn when you're working with this academic work, but I encourage you to do it because, if you're going to be writing papers for other people to see, if they see a lot of sloppy academic writing, a lot of sloppy, incorrect APA formatting and referencing, it looks bad. It looks badly. It shows up badly, and it really discredits your work even before the person starts to look at your ideas.
Dr. Payne?
Go ahead.
A quick question on another subject. So
yes.
on the posts, what I've noticed, some people are writing a lot. And so I've looked at some of them, it almost looks like a mini paper. Could you just, I'm assuming you just want us to answer the question, but be thorough where we need to be without overly so and not have to cite sources or whatever. And then the second question is, like our post for this week, it talk about theoretical frameworks, theories behind your questions. Is there a list out there somewhere that defines the different theories that are out there or not?
That's a good question. I started to make myself a list of theories that I've come upon. But, I haven't found a good list. I don't know, Dr. Henry, you found a good list of theories that would be useful for a student to even begin to get an idea what theories look like?
There is, and I don't expect to find a list of theories. However, what you are going to find as you read the journal articles, and I recommend that be put into that grid that we ask you to complete, is that in the research articles, they will identify the theory or theories around which the study is done. So it is good if in your notes you can capture that. Because there are just so many theories out there, and then there are overlapping theories. So what I would say to you is be aware in your reading the research articles, be aware of the underlying theory. In a good research report, the writer will acknowledge the theoretical foundation of his or her work. It's very rare that that is not acknowledged, but in terms of academic writing, it is assumed that the readers are familiar with the theory. So sometimes the theoretical framework may not be explicit, but you can assume it if you have knowledge of it. But looking at it from a beginner's perspective, I would suggest that as you read the research articles, look for a specific reference to a theory or theories that undergird that research report. But they're just, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say that we go to find a list. Okay?
Yeah, that's a good point. I was looking for a
Sorry,
list.
another thing I would recommend that you do as you start searching, and that's Kevin. I know Kevin is interested in, I think, the relationship between faith and business. Well, both are very broad concepts, but what I would think of, Kevin, as I look at the literature, is put in the word theory in the search, a theory of the relationship between faith and religion, and see what comes up. Or theory of the relationship, between faith and business, and see what comes up.
Okay, that's helpful. And
Or
then back.
another thing I would put in is a phrase such as the impact of or the influence of religion on business. And I'm sure you're going to find a lot of articles coming up to respond to that. And of course, you're looking for peer-reviewed articles.
Yep.
Those are just some hints on how you do your search. You know, and then what happens, of course, once you find one article, look at the, especially if it's an article that you are going to be interested in, look at the references at the end of that article. And that becomes a whole source that you could use for your own work. Look at the references of the article.
Okay. And then back to my
that
question
goes
about,
not just for Kevin, but for all of you in your respective searches.
and then back to my question about length of post. I'm just curious to know your thoughts on that.
Okay. When I look at the post, I'm not evaluating on length in the sense of long or short. What I'm looking for is the quality of the post, the content, right? So you will find that sometimes I say to a student, you didn't cover X or you didn't cover Y or you did not sufficiently address this issue, right? So the length doesn't bother me as I read it. We're looking for substance, right? And if you are able to show from the post that you understand and you focus in the direction that we're asking you to take, that's fine. But yes, I do understand. I have to read them all. So, yes, and I've toyed with the idea. I myself could be a lengthy writer, but I can also be very concise. I've toyed with the idea of saying to students, please post no more than, say, 300 words. But I have not done that because I also recognize that that may limit somebody who is really getting to the issue and doing a good job of it. So, you know, I am aware of that. Okay?
Makes perfect sense. Yep. Thank you.
You're
Henry
welcome.
asked, are we required to, there's the sources, is that Do we need to be consistent with that, or it's not necessary? Or if we have it, it's up to us. Is that something that would distract or subtract from?
Okay, is this Jacqueline?
Yes.
Could you just explain to me what you mean by what you just said about the sources and distracting?
We might cite where if we were asked to read, or we have quoted from other sources to.
Oh yes, you want to do that. You want to identify your sources. That is
okay.
Appropriate. And there are two ways to identify your sources. Especially if you quoted directly from a source, you want to identify that in the post. And then, as you will see, one or two students have done a good job where at the end of the post, they put references. And using the APA style, you only put in a references list the work that you have used. So definitely, if you have cited, but I'm not necessarily penalizing you if you don't have the references attached to the discussion. But definitely within the body of the discussion, if you are using sources, I expect you to identify those sources, because the system also puts into the UniCheck the discussions to look for originality and plagiarism.
Two more questions,
so that's a good
question. Just two more questions regarding as I can't recall which of the source materials spoke to not having enough empirical data to help us with our own research. And if we go along a particular line without having enough, it could impede our own research. In Jamaica, of course, you know, you should know, as a small island, we don't have a lot of research. So we might be relying on a lot of international research. Is this something that we should be mindful of in taking on a topic which I'm interested in, of course, relationship with men not taking up or being in our businesses and or growth of businesses and so on. Should I be concerned about that at this stage? Or I should just continue to explore, because we're a small island and I know there's probably research outside for that, but not for Jamaica.
Okay, that's a good question, observation, Jackie, and I'm going to answer it. Now, to begin with, and what I found is that oftentimes at the beginning of a class like this, most people come in assuming that the thing that they're interested in, few people have studied it. To the contrary, it's the opposite. When you put in your keywords, the keywords or the key concepts that you're attracted to, you put them in the search engine. The first thing that boggles the mind is how many thousands of articles they pop up with. So that my answer to students is always, there is much more literature, and here I'm talking about peer-reviewed literature on that concept that you're thinking to study than you could imagine. That's my beginning point. With respect to your context, and the context is Jamaica, yes, compared to North America, there is fewer empirical research. However, it will surprise you how much more research has been done about situations in Jamaica, albeit not necessarily by Jamaicans. And you're not looking for research that is done by Jamaicans. You're looking for research, period. And thirdly, the fact that you may think that there are fewer research articles on your issue should not stop you from wanting to study your issue, because then what it may represent is that you are going to be making a significant contribution to the research, the body of research, because so few people may have studied the issue that you're interested in. So I hope that answers your question and encourages you to pursue your interest.
Well,
Yeah. Go ahead,
sorry.
Doctor.
Dr. Henry, I actually share with Jacqueline what she just raised, and I listened to your response. I was going to ask for a separate discussion if you are available, maybe right after this. Maybe, and I've tried the keywords in my topic. I've tried to change them around and reorganize them. I honestly, like Jacqueline said, I didn't find very relevant journals, you know, from ProQuest or from Google Scholar. So I was hoping if you could find time, or Dr. Payne, focus, you know, my research.
Okay, Arissa, I would be happy to meet with you in my Zoom room immediately after the class. I'll send you a Zoom room invitation to just walk you through the process of finding relevant material.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be good. And I'm going to have to close this room down because we've been at about an hour and a half. I want to, this recording, I didn't want to go over that. But yeah, that would be great. And, you know, if there's any thoughts that would be helpful to the whole course, the whole class on finding topics, you might just jot down a few of those ideas, and we can post them somewhere in the class, because I think that is always the issue of learning how to use the databases so that you can use the right search topics, search phrases in order to find the information you want related to your particular topic. All right, I think we will need to close the session. Like to hold these, you know, to an hour and 15 minutes. We've gone to an hour and 30, so I think we'll go ahead and stop now. You can continue these words in the discussion area. Bring up ideas there, and so the whole class can be seeing those. That would be very helpful. Okay. With that, I'm going to stop the recording.